One of the other things that the Chinese communists have done recently is move half a dozen warships to the Middle East to make sure their presence is felt there as that conflict develops, right?
Absolutely. I mean, look, this is something that we've been seeing for really the past couple of decades, and especially in the last few years, which is, China is expanding its global presence. It is particularly focused on the Middle East. To some extent, it's on economic considerations. They've got a lot of deals out there. They certainly get a tremendous amount of their oil, but that oil really is translating into a strategic interest in the Middle East. And the Chinese want to make sure that if there is ever a war with the United States, say over Taiwan, that they can lock down their interests in the Middle East. And it's playing into China getting involved in the Middle East in a whole variety of different ways. Some somewhat helpful, others much more unhelpful. And in the recent crisis, they've taken, in effect, Hamas's side fully as a way of kind of driving a wedge between the United States and its Arab allies.
And so is this, I mean, we talked about this with the invasion, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I mean, does this unrest, war, really, in Gaza, does this provide that much more incentive for Xi to move on Taiwan in the not-too-distant future?
Potentially, absolutely. This is one of these circumstances where, again, there are all these well-meaning people who are saying, let's have a ceasefire. We got to have a ceasefire. We don't want any more people to die. And obviously, nobody wants more Palestinian civilians to die. Nobody should want any more Israeli civilians to die as well. But we need to recognize that right now, Hamas and Iran have won huge victories. Right? They have taken Israel by surprise. They slaughtered 1,300 Israelis, again, including women, children, infants, the elderly. Just a horrific action. Shutting down that war now simply hands that victory to Hamas and Iran. And if they believe that they can win more of these, they'll keep doing it. And I have no doubt that the Chinese are watching carefully. If the West is not willing to defend its interests, that will be a very important signal to the Chinese about Taiwan.
Colin Rugg, who a lot of people follow on Twitter, he said that China has reportedly deployed multiple warships to the Middle East region. Mm-hmm. Is this true? And how many? He's reporting up to 6 Chinese warships are being deployed to that area.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers, Amy, but that sounds right to me. And again, it's exactly what you would expect. The Chinese are taking a much greater interest in the area. They are looking for opportunities to advance their own interests, typically at the expense of our own.
You suggest in Peace and Foreign Affairs that this conflict between Israel and Hamas could be limited. It doesn't have to necessarily spill over into southern Lebanon with Hezbollah, into Yemen with the Houthis, into Iran with the mullahs. So obviously the conflagration is the concern. Why is there some prospect that it could be more limited?
Yeah, I think this is very important, Dan. And first, let me start by saying, one, wars are unpredictable. I would never say don't be worried about escalation. And two, I've been warning for years about the potential for a region-wide war. But in this case, I think that it's important to recognize that there's already a lot of evidence that both Iran and Hezbollah are not looking to fight Israel. And that should not tie our hands. It should not tie Israel's hands. That's one of the things I'm worried about. I mean, the biggest, most important piece of evidence that I can cite in favor of that is Iran, and because of Iran, therefore Hezbollah, knew about this attack beforehand. So if they had wanted to, they could have joined Hamas in the original attack on October 7th. That was the time for them to have attacked Israel if they wanted to do so. That was when Israel was most surprised, when it was least prepared, when it was least able to defend itself. Had Iran and or Hezbollah joined in that initial attack on October 7th, the damage to Israel probably would have been an order of magnitude greater. So again, if they wanted to fight with Israel, that was the time to do it. It's very clear that they're not looking for that fight. They understand how powerful Israel is. Unlike Hamas, they're not ready for that Israeli response. And so I think that what that signals is that the likely Iranian and Hezbollah participation in this war is going to be limited. They'll do a bunch of stuff, but like we're already seeing, they might do somewhat more. You're not going to see a Hezbollah ground offensive into Israel. They really have no capability to do so now, especially now that Israel has fully alerted its forces. You may see more rocket fire, but right now that's my best guess as to what you're likely to see. And again, for that reason, we shouldn't let this threat of escalation, which you know has been tying the Biden administration's hands constantly over aid to Ukraine. We should not allow the same thing to tie either our hands or Israel's hands when dealing with Hamas.
Well, these other actors, terrorist organizations like Hezbollah, are they maybe just being more circumspect? They want to see how the West reacts. They want to see how the Arab world reacts before they, run headlong into Panzer fire the way that Hamas is?
Yeah, to some extent. But again, if they wanted to do this, they could have participated on October 7th. They would have done enormous damage to Israel. Again, they might choose to get involved, but what's really important, especially for Hezbollah, is how Israel responds. And they've experienced that beforehand. They saw it during the Second Lebanon War of 2006. And it's very important to remember that while the world remembers the Second Lebanon War of 2006 as a humiliating Israeli defeat, which at a political level it was, at a military level, Israel still did tremendous damage to Hezbollah, so much so that Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, afterwards famously gave an interview in which he said, if I had known how Israel was going to respond, I never would have done it in the first place. Right? They're still in that
That's where
mode.
you want them. Yeah, that's where you want them, that's for sure.
Is it true that the Egyptians, though, warned the IDF that, hey, that we're hearing chatter that an attack might take place?
As a former CIA officer, these are the kinds of things that you hear all the time. It's possible that happened. It's also possible that this is just a rumor, that this is something that the Egyptians are putting out. We will find all of this out when this is all said and done. The Israelis are always very thorough about conducting these, deeply searching probes to figure out when something went wrong, why it went wrong, and how to fix it. There's going to be one after this war. That's when we'll find out exactly what happens.